Hello and welcome to our interview series. My name is Katina Michael, and today we address the topic of joint impact assessment of critical technologies for peace and stability with a bit of a spin. We're with Professor Evangelos Pappas from RMIT University, who researches medtech research and innovation. In fact, he's the director of RMIT's Medtech Research and Innovation Hub. He's a professor of musculoskeletal health and RMIT's inaugural professorial vice chancellor as a research fellow. His work is quite interesting because it intersects engineering, computer science, and health together, where he leads projects using technology to prevent injuries and improve recovery for people with musculoskeletal injuries. Evangelos is passionate about turning research into real-world solutions, and he works closely with industry, health services, and government partners to make sure new ideas move quickly from the lab into clinics and sports fields abroad. And he's worked internationally, and we're so happy to have him today as part of our interview series for our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade grant, which was given to us in 2024. Welcome, Evangelos.
Hello, Katina. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much for agreeing. Let's start because, interestingly, this grant is on peace and stability and critical tech. And your disciplinary background is probably somewhat different to most of our interviewees. Can you tell us about your research and your studies?
Sure. Okay. So here's my journey, my academic journey in just a couple of minutes. So I was trained as a physiotherapist in Greece, as I'd like to point out, at the end of last century. And then I moved to the United States, where I did a master's in orthopedic physical therapy and a PhD in orthopedic biomechanics. So I held an academic appointments at Long Island University, then at the University of Sydney for 8 years, where I was also the head of the discipline of physiotherapy there at the University of Wollongong, where we crossed paths, Katina, for 4 years, where I was leading the development of the university's health and well-being precinct at the innovation campus. And for the last year at RMIT University, where you mentioned I'm wearing these three hats as a professor of musculoskeletal health, where I work with a really amazing team of physiotherapists who have a very innovative physiotherapy program there that we believe we train the next generation of clinicians, and with technology evolving so rapidly, we give them all the skills that we can in terms of artificial intelligence and basic knowledge, as well as the use of technology within the healthcare system. I have my own research line as working on knee injuries, as you mentioned, and I'm also leading the university's MedTech Research and Innovation Hub. So yeah, very busy, but very exciting things at RMIT University that traditionally has this, as the name mentions, these strengths in technology and engineering and computer science, but also rapidly increasing strengths in health at a different campus out in Bandura. But we have physiotherapy, nursing, psychology, and so on and so forth. So my job is to ensure that our engineers and the people who are very good at making things and solving problems and creating solutions, they work from the very beginning with the people who understand who are at the coalface of healthcare, and the people who understand what the real problems are within the healthcare system. So it's an exciting job, and yeah, I'm very excited to be here.
Tell us how technology is revolutionizing medical practice.
Mm. Oh, it's in so many different ways that it's very hard to keep up with. Obviously, there is the artificial intelligence revolution, and that is something that we cannot turn back. And I think that will produce a rapid acceleration in the outcomes for health in the not too distant future, is my prediction and my hope. So a lot of things have been streamlined. Again, just recently we have a partnership with Northern Health, one of the larger hospital systems here in Melbourne. And I was in a meeting with a technology partner, and one of the emergency department physicians said that They had this patient who was not getting better. They had tried everything. And then pretty much as a last ditch effort, they put the symptoms and some of the lab tests within one of the artificial intelligence systems, and it came up with a very obscure diagnosis, which actually was correct and changed the trajectory for this patient. So, obviously AI has its limitations, and of course there will be, applications of AI that can be quite dystopian. But at the same time, I think it has opened up new horizons in terms of improving the outcomes in health. So that is, one aspect of how things are changing. Now, the other aspect is with how quickly and accurately we can create medical devices nowadays. So I have been very privileged at RMIT. We have this extensive community of inventors who work in engineering labs, and they create. And again, I'm a clinician, but at the same time, I have been working on this nexus of technology and healthcare for the last 25 years, and I'm still amazed by the solutions that our colleagues can produce over the weekend. You can give them a problem, and then on Monday they provide you with a prototype that, when I was a PhD student, it would really take years to produce, and now things are so rapid. One thing that I can mention, and I would invite you, Katina, and the rest of the scientific community to visit us for an actual tour when you're in Melbourne, is the Discovery to Device facility, which is really groundbreaking for being in a university. So it's a prototyping and upscaling facility where inventors can take their solutions and the devices outside of the typical university laboratory and then rapidly produce hundreds, if not thousands, of the devices for clinical trials and for commercialization. So yeah, at RMIT we are working very much. So we are considering ourselves a very industry-friendly university. So yeah, it is an exciting time to see how quickly nowadays, compared to the past, again, not quickly enough for the patients who are sick or for the clinicians who are dealing with these problems, but certainly much quicker than even like 10, 15 years ago, that the solutions are being quickly moving out of the laboratory and into the healthcare system.
It is astounding to observe that as someone who studies innovation as a practice, uh, and the speed of prototyping from what used to be just low fidelity
Mm.
prototypes to now these high fidelity functional prototypes. It's not just paper based as we once enjoyed and encouraged in our students. It's always great to create a paper prototype which is low fidelity. You can see it perhaps if it's an interface, or you can feel it if it's like a box or a node that you can hold. But as we go into these very fast turnaround, high fidelity innovations and prototypes, it is incredible when we're looking at venture capital and ways we can get funding for our new innovations and commercialize. Um, on that front end, are you seeing just a rapid motion of rapid prototyping approaches? Is there a way at that very grassroots level of where the ideation is happening to consider assessing a potential biomedical, innovation or something of that nature? Is there that assessment, or it's more of a agile kind of, let's look and see, and let's see if someone picks it up on the market? What are you seeing?
Um, Probably the latter, sadly, I would say. I guess starting with the more optimistic thing, I think it is really an exciting time for healthcare and the healthcare innovation, because unlike when I was a physiotherapy student, where you had this very predictable path, right? You either work for a hospital or you work for a private clinic or for a professional sports team, right? There were like a very limited number of career pathways. What a lot of the new graduates do now, whether they are nurses or doctors or physiotherapists or other allied health professionals, is that you see, exactly because of how much easier is now to start your own company and then tackle a problem, something that can be very close to your heart, or a problem that you think that is in need of an urgent solution. So you see these very young and energetic teams of new graduates, not going to the hospital or going into clinical practice, but taking 2 or 3 years to raise funds and can create, technological solutions for health. So there is this explosion of ideas, and I'm in my role as the director of the MedTech Hub. I go, on a regular basis to events that incubators and activators create, and I always live very optimistic for the future. Very very excited about the solutions. We don't do the early technological impact assessment as systematically or routinely as we should. And I think part of that is because they're so overwhelmed. I mean, obviously, it's a new journey for them. There's all these programs that are offered at RMIT through the RMIT Activator, all these other government or university-based programs for new inventors and for startups. And there is so many new skills that they need to develop that I believe, and that's probably something that we need to change, is that the impact assessment of the new technology that they produced is very much in the background. They have to raise. I mean, a lot of these companies, let's face it, they just live on a monthly paycheck cycle about whether they can raise funds or bootstrap some of the inventions that the companies that they have. So adding, this extra layer is probably something that is not a priority for them. So yeah, we're grateful for the work that you guys do in terms of raising the need for an impact assessment and creating, more visibility around that. And I really believe that there is probably in the technology impact assessment, I mean, it's something that at some point needs to be done, right? And it needs to be done systematically. But I think what we have not educated the community enough is that the collateral benefits of that. So when you sit down systematically and you do the impact assessment, there's all these benefits that go beyond the actual questionnaires and forms that you're filling out, because it can sparkle new ideas, right? When you do that systematically, it may allow you to understand the competitive environment a bit more. And maybe that's where your new idea for your next startup will come up, right? And I think at the moment, at least from where I sit, I see the technology impact assessment more as a necessary evil that some of these companies, when they get to that, they have to do. So I do think we need to rebrand it a little bit and highlight some of the benefits that would come from a systematic impact assessment.
They're amazing thoughts. I mean, anyone looking at Australia's commercialization success and
Mm.
our R&D reinvestment and the percent of success stories we have regarding patents to diffusion, it's very low. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the numbers are very telling. I think we're 150th in the world after Botswana.
yeah, I read that. Yeah.
That's scary, given how advanced we are, and as we say, how our ideas are so vibrant, right? So
Mm.
something's happening towards that later stage of us going to commercialize and selling our ideas, pitching our ideas to international investors, and understanding the international landscape. And I think uh, I also noted, for example, I was part of the ethical, legal, social implications panel for DARPA, and they invited me to give a workshop on embedding LC principles in our program management at DARPA. And I said, as you said just rightly a moment ago, that if we can introduce some kind of approach to understanding the ethics, the legal, the social impact, we would make better products,
Mm.
and we would offer new value add that we hadn't considered in the past. And so it is about impact. And no matter what we do in any area these days, there's either a privacy impact assessment, a risk assessment, uh, technology impact assessment, child rights impact assessment, fundamental rights impact assessment as part of the EU AI Act. Now, there's always these impact assessments. And the question
Mhm.
is, do we use it as a tool of compliance, or do we use it embedded as a tool of a design?
Right.
And I love what you are saying. From your perspective in the health domain, and we'll talk about how health intersects with peace and stability in a moment, in the global context. But from your perspective, what should a technology impact assessment maybe contain?
Um, well, I think a technology impact assessment should start by educating the people who complete these assessments that is very much an estimate, right? It's not a hard science, at least in my opinion.
Mhm.
Yet it's something that, and that goes back to the discussion that we had for the previous question, but it's something that is essential for this and this reason, not only to meet the compliance requirements, but also because it can open up. I guess the best way to explain it in my mind is that it could highlight what your blind spots are. And there is plenty in the startup journey, right? There's many blind spots, and the impact assessment can allow you to at least be aware of some of these, maybe, just to quote Donald Rumsfeld, like the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, and so on and so forth. So I think it should be something that is embedded within the process. So you can't really, it shouldn't be voluntary, because then, in the startup journey, especially early on, people would skip them. So I think it should be something that needs to happen early on at the ideation phase, preferably. And then, probably once the idea and the solution is a bit better honed, have, some type of longitudinal format. So here's what you completed a year ago, but how would you answer some of these questions differently now? And I think that will allow the startup community, again, it will allow them the opportunity to reflect on the journey for the last year and how things have changed and evolved. It should be simple, and not too time consuming. And it should be tailored to the specific industry, and even, within a specific industry, that specific solution. So it should sometimes with these more generic assessments, a lot of the questions are not applicable, and then people just spend a lot of time trying to answer it, especially if it's mandatory. Well, they don't see how that could be applicable in their case. So they should be flexible enough that can be tailored to specific solutions. Probably don't tell you anything new, Katina, but yeah, probably from a more clinical and research point of view, I think that could be the main items that I would highlight.
That's fantastic. In fact, one of the goals of
Mm,
technology impact assessments is education.
that's good.
It's been repeated so often in our interviews. People are saying, well, we do this not just for better design or to look at poster diffusion of a technology, but we look at it as a educative tool for the
Mm,
public. How
mm,
can we make these open to not just the developers and designers and the investors, but to all stakeholders,
mm,
potential patients in the future, in the case of health and health tech. So I like what you're saying. We also have come after, a couple of dozen interviews, we've come to the understanding that most people also believe TIAs shouldn't be rigid.
yeah.
It's there shouldn't be a defined template or pro forma or rubric. It should be flexible based on the context, whatever that context is. So a lot of what you're saying across domains is the same.
Mm,
Some people in more sort of political tech have discussed the importance of history, which has been interesting. Where has this come from? Over what period of time? What was its predecessor? We can look at implantable technologies today for the heart. And of
mm,
course, we used to have them, you know, external, then we used to wear them around our neck, the pacemakers, and then they were embedded. But there was a history behind
mm,
that.
mm,
But another point you mentioned about uh, designers designing probably outside the clinical setting. It's encouraged so greatly when we're doing these impact assessments to prove that we've been inside uh, uh, defined spaces. I'll give you an example. Once someone created a really good technology that was external to the body, but someone would have to carry that device to the bathroom, for example, or to shower, right? And of course, we can disconnect devices, but in some cases, you can't disconnect because it
mm.
would render the patient, you know, uh, dead, so to speak. But the lead was not long enough, right?
Right.
In other cases, we've looked at deep brain stimulation devices that have not had the right kind of cable, so the wire trips when it comes into an inventory network of some type at a shopping mall. So
Mm.
there's very, very critical things about developing tech in situ. Yes, begin in the lab, but then test in situ. As you know, the massive amounts of clinical trials that go into what you're doing in developing all of these new innovations. Um, there are these stringent processes that clinicians have always gone through to get their products out to market because they're not just health related like a smartwatch. They're actually, about safety and no harm to individuals and the risk factor, which can be high sometimes. Um, with respect to social impact and the benefits of technology, biomedical engineers are renowned for making tech that helps people live a
Mhm.
better quality of life. They're not just life sustaining, but life enhancing, if we
Mhm.
use the medical terminology. Um, Do you ever see the potential to identify risks at an early stage? Is it like doing a technology impact assessment, or those risks will, no matter how much testing you do, those risks will come to the fore post diffusion?
Yeah, well, I think a combination of both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that technology impact assessment will allow you to systematically identify some of the more obvious risks. But as you gave, some very good examples, there are things that you probably will not know, the unknown unknowns, the things that you don't know until you actually test them and until they are more widely implemented. Who would have thought that, if you go to the shopping center and in a specific radio frequency area that, this could trip a very important device. But now we do. So the next
Yes.
person who creates solutions in the same space or with similar technology can learn from this experience and then be a bit more proactive. But yeah, you can never completely eliminate risk. Is my especially when it gets to new solutions, particularly very innovative solutions, implantables and things like that. But you can certainly learn from the history of human errors. So I think, and I don't know if that exists, but probably a database of where people can go and search so they can educate themselves because a lot of these situations are not very widely known. You can go and search and, specific devices and with certain specifications and whether, there is a history of malfunctioning under certain circumstances. I think that would be very, very helpful for inventors because, again, we are a lot of the people who create the solutions are very, very technologically trained, but how these solutions will work within the human body or around or towards the human body is frequently unknown. It's very unpredictable. So yeah, I think we still have a lot to learn in this space, but the technology impact assessment can certainly identify the more obvious issues and allow you to preempt those because that's the other thing. You may have a wonderful solution that if you troubleshoot some of the more obvious problems early on could be very widely implemented with all the advantages that this may have both for healthcare but also for the people who have created these solutions. But if you have a very tragic event early on, that could very much, kill this whole process. So I think, it's not unlike any other device that, you should try your best to make it safe, which then will allow a broader implementation.
Oh, it's so wonderful to hear you speak about patient feedback
Mm.
and participation in this innovation process. You mentioned a database that could be available, and of course, in the States, as we know, the MAUDE database was used by the FDA, the
Mhm.
MAUDE, where there were exceptions or there was feedback. And most of our providers today have a website, a hotline that people can call if a
Call and
device
report, yeah.
malfunctions and
Mm.
report, and there's always someone that will reply. Um, the construction engineers that I teach in the MBA program call this a risk register. And when we're building big buildings, there's amazing detail that goes into risk identification, because no one wants to be held accountable or liable for something that goes wrong with the foundations of a building or the structure of the building. And so some of my students in management roles literally walk around with a little book, and that's their risk register. And then
Right.
they transfer that to an electronic database. And a lot of this is now being, you know, placed onto smartphones. But I think you're right. We're going towards this, uh, risk culture and risk assessment towards risk mitigation, where you want to identify what these risks are and mitigate as they present themselves. And uh, you know, uh, what came to my mind were the construction engineers and the risk register, and that's something that in designing systems in socio-technical design we've often emphasized how important it is, as you've noted, to have something like this. Like, and that brings me to the question of stakeholders. So you mentioned patients. Uh, who are the stakeholders of a technology impact assessment in your eyes?
And I can only speak about medical and health technology, but the obvious stakeholder is the patient and then patient groups. And they very frequently, I mean, it is really good to see that now grants like MRFF, they require that you have a patient, somebody from a patient group from the very early stages. And we have found in our work that extremely helpful. Not only, and it's not tokenistic, it's not only when you receive the money, but from the very beginning. And they are providing a perspective very frequently that the researchers cannot see. So that has been eye-opening for a lot of the research teams. Obviously, government is a stakeholder here, and regulatory bodies within the government. Then the TGA in particular within the Australian context. But I would also add the clinicians in particular. Frequently, the idea and the identification of problems starts from a clinician, but also the hospital administrators and then the health administrators more broadly. So an idea may be really wonderful. The patient may accept it, it may improve health outcomes, but looking at it from a health administrator point of view early on and then getting their perspective about, is it cost effective? Is it how is it going to fit within the broader ecosystem? Something that we don't do until the very end frequently. And I think that is a challenge. I mean, they're frequently very busy people, but I think for the system in general, it's going to save a lot of work if you involve them early on.
Yeah, you remind me of some early work I was doing on prosthesis and exoskeletons.
Yeah.
And of course, this is, I'm sure, touching on some of your work on musculoskeletal analysis that you do. Uh, but I recall uh, insurance companies
Mm.
not supporting very novel and early innovations, despite that there was great function and benefit to the patients. And so I remember very early on, maybe it was 2012, 13, we were looking at exoskeletons, especially towards ankles, your
Mm.
domain, that would allow us to do not just three types of angles, but 128 degrees of freedom to try and understand how the foot was moving, how the ankle was moving. And forgive me, I'm not using clinical terms, but this wonderful innovation could not be, absorbed as a cost to the patient because they didn't have that
Yeah.
kind of money. But how close in the health sector now, with this all stakeholder approach you're talking about, which I agree with, it takes so many different stakeholders to come together to make something flourish. But what could we possibly do to get these ties closer between partners, between provider and insurance company and government? Like, is there a magic solution to that?
Oh, yeah, probably not a magic solution, but I do think, and I think that's where the role of both the government, but also a lot of these, startup incubators, which I think they do to a certain extent, where they assign mentors and, people who usually from other domains who can be there and mentor them. But yeah, I think having more of an advisory board, for lack of a better term, early on for startups, I think that would be good. Obviously, that time is expensive, particularly for the smarter people. But it doesn't have to be people who are very high on the hierarchy. So I think having these panels that can provide feedback early on, that have this multidisciplinary expertise, people from government, from the health insurance, as you said, hospital administrators, then the researchers, and the clinicians and the patients. Obviously, a pretty large advisory group, but having that these discussions early on, I think that would be good. Now, how we engineer that, I'm not sure. Again, I'm just a clinician here, but I do think that having that systematically would really be very effective overall and save a lot of waste within the system. We talk about these wonderful inventions and the success stories within the startup ecosystem, but we less frequently talk about the waste, about people trying to solve the wrong problem or implementing a solution that would not work, but don't find out until a couple of years later, and after they have spent, a few dozen $1,000s. So yeah, I do think that would mitigate some of these issues. Probably on the more optimistic side, and that's a bit self-serving too, because RMIT is a partner at the Aikenhead Center for Medical Discovery, which just launched just a couple of months ago. But having these specialized organizations and foundations that can take by the hand the early startup inventor, immerse them in the hospital environment. And the ACMD is within St. Vincent's Hospitals, with partners not only from RMIT, but also the University of Melbourne, Australian Catholic University, Swinburne, the Bionics Institute is there. So having all this multidisciplinary expertise and pretty much being around people who have been successful and have done this journey before, I think that's invaluable. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about bringing everybody together who has passion, but also the experience around it. It may just be speaking to somebody over lunch, or in the elevator, just have a random discussion that can open up your eyes into some of the challenges that you may be facing and provide you with the solutions to address them.
It's interesting hearing this, and a lot of people always say in tech, it's not the tech. And you say, well, what is it? That is the barrier, perhaps,
Mm.
or where we could make major inroads. And I'm hearing from you, it could be stakeholder engagement. It could
Yeah.
be social rather than technical, that the emphasis, or building, as you say, that ecosystem to allow it to be raised and interconnected and meshed. So the environment that we're in, and perhaps that's a call to all Australians in this space to keep building on that ecosystem, that
Mm.
environment that allows stakeholders to flourish. So I take that away. Um,
Well,
into
see, the other
Tell me.
exciting thing that at the University of Sydney now is, the biomedical accelerator there, which again will uh, catalyze a lot of these problems. Is my hope. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I don't highlight just ACMD that RMIT is a partner of, but yeah, there is multiple similar initiatives around the country, which I think will pay dividends down the road.
Yeah, and one of the questions I had prepared for all our interviewees is, can you conduct technology impact assessment jointly? And I'm not going to tell you what
Mm.
jointly means in this context, because it means different things to different people. But do you think, in given what we've just been talking about with regards to the importance of bringing people together and stakeholders together, what does jointly mean to you when we look at innovation and the creation of different types of health technologies?
Yeah, my interpretation of jointly in this context would be that that's when you bring the rest of the stakeholders in the same room and they answer the same questions in terms of what do you believe will be the impact of this new technology? Because the health insurer will probably give you a different answer than the patient, and the patient will probably give you a different answer than the hospital administrator. So in my mind, this is what jointly means. And I think, and maybe that's another, again, problem, nothing new there for you, Katina, working in this space for a long time. But yeah, very frequently it's the evolution of the ideas that happens when you bring them together. So I don't think that impact assessment should be done jointly, you said jointly, but I don't think that should be interpreted that many stakeholders do it on their own. It should be more a joint, meaning in a shared environment and after a discussion.
Yeah, I dream of a system like that. And I think for innovators out there in the software space or in the app or platform space, this is where we need to go. And I think you're right. I mean, that's a very fresh perspective, Evangelos. In terms of, if we look at this internationally, and we look at the fact that some people do not technology impact assessments, but what they call in India, for example, health impact assessments.
Okay.
And it's digital health impact assessments. And this notion of how the digital is changing uh, our landscape
Mm.
completely, country to country. And for countries where there are 1 billion people population and growing, very rapidly, that's the China and India market and beyond. Uh, Health is very much part of security and stability and securitization of the populace. It's better health means better outcomes for everybody. And so digital health tech is now really growing as a
Mm.
space in these countries because it's densely populated. Uh, the, People are closer together physically. Outbreaks can, be take a city by storm, but also the fact that there is a realization that healthier people in a community actually means greater productivity for a country. So we used to just think about, oh, digital tech is important, and especially with regards to health, and here are all our different contraptions. But do you ever think about it on an international scale that the work that you're doing, say at RMIT University as the director, is influential across Asia, for example?
Mm.
Are there examples of that?
There are, I mean, sadly, not as often as they should be, because at the end of the day, I really believe, particularly if you work in health, but in any profession, obviously you do it because you need to pay the bills and for other reasons, but the primary reason should be that you're trying to improve people's lives, right? Whether allow them to live longer or better lives or in, more secure homes or whatever it may be. So there should be this, higher goal beyond getting a paycheck. And very frequently on a day-to-day basis, we deal with this next urgent email or the next form or the ethics application and beating the deadlines and reading the proofs of a paper and all those things that we do as academics and researchers. But I have been very privileged to work very closely with the international portfolio at RMIT. So we do have a clear international strategy. Just on this coming Monday, I'll be speaking at the panel at the Indonesia Business Forum here in Melbourne. So we visit Indonesia quite frequently, and also China, India, and Vietnam and Singapore. So these are the 5 countries that are a priority for RMIT. So I have been very impressed by how crystallized the international strategy is here. And again, Indonesia is where I have joined the delegations more frequently. A very rapidly developing country, in many different fronts. An island nation, very similar to Australia in terms of having these needs for remote care, right? So when I do go there and meet with the local, and they have this very bright. And hardworking young population. And when we meet with the incubators there, again, I leave very optimistic from these meetings just because I do believe that we already started seeing some of the benefits of the solutions that they have. So there is a company, for example, that provides these remote physiotherapy sessions to people who are not anywhere close a physiotherapy clinic. And the fact that now with video analysis, talking about how technology has changed. I've been working in biomechanics since the era where you had to upload this very low resolution video and then manually click on where you believe the joint was. And now artificial intelligence and in combination with the very high quality of videos that you can capture even with smartphones nowadays has revolutionized this field. And, just earlier today, I was speaking with a startup here that is based here in Melbourne that has automated the analysis of videos. So doing that at this scale and very remotely to populations who wouldn't otherwise have access to it is really wonderful. So yeah, rarely, but I do see the benefits of some of these solutions to a lot of the remote and underserved populations in countries outside Australia. And to be honest, that is what keeps us going. I mean, our job can be, quite difficult sometimes with very long hours and working late in the evening, but you do that for a reason, right? And when there is an amputee in remote Indonesia who gets the benefit of that, and then they can enjoy their family lifestyle or go to work the next day, it's all worth it, isn't it? So you do forget about that, but yeah, I do think it is important for us to remind, especially the newer generations of academics and researchers and inventors, that's how you change lives, right?
Well said. And on that point, I think you've somehow summarized our whole grant, which has moved from just studying conflict technologies or dual use technologies that could be used for conflict and wars, to reframing that actually peace and security is just about the things that you've been speaking about. And that will allow all individuals to have a better opportunity at a better life, a better quality of life. And on that, I want to thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with us, especially given it's not perhaps at the central focus of our grant,
Mm.
but the insights you offered uh, coincide with some of the NGOs from the digital health tech space that we've interviewed in India. So it is about reach. It is about giving options to rural communities. It is about the public interest and the good that can come from new technologies as we roll out, some of them virtual, as you've noted. I mean, you know, physiotherapy as a service could be the next big thing from what you're saying to us, so to speak. But Evangelos, Pappas, thank you so much. We wish you well with the hub at RMIT University, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Katina, to provide these perspectives. But more importantly, thank you for all the work that you do, the impactful work that you do in this space.
Thank you very much. Thank you.